Special, WLKY and the Louisville League of Women Voters present a forum featuring the candidates for Louisville Mayor.
Good evening. I am Carrie Grace, and I want to welcome you to the 2026 WLKY Louisville Mayoral Forum in partnership with the League of Women Voters. Tonight, I am joined by 7 candidates running for Louisville Mayor, and we want to thank you all for joining us. Now, this is the first time the Louisville Mayor is a nonpartisan position. The 2 candidates who get the most votes in the primary on May 19th will face off in the general election in November. Now, tonight's forum will start with a 1-minute opening statement from each candidate. Candidates will get 45 seconds to answer each question. The candidates drew before tonight's forum to determine the order. Craig Greenberg will go first for the opening statements. Mr. Greenberg.
Good evening. It's been the honor of a lifetime to serve as mayor of Louisville. And with this job comes great responsibility to make our city safer, stronger, and healthier. We've reduced violent crime by over 40%. We've created over 9,000 new good-paying jobs. We've gone all in on our parks and our libraries. And as a result of this progress, I've been endorsed by over 50,000 union families, Governor Andy Beshear, the Louisville Democratic Party, and others. Yet we all know that we still have so much work to do. These are challenging times, rising costs on family, and other challenges facing all of us in our city. So I humbly ask for your support so that we can keep moving Louisville forward in a new direction, build more housing, continue the progress that we're seeing across our entire city.
Mr. DeVore.
Yes, ma'am. My name is Bob DeVore, more with DeVore. So I am the first, ever working class candidate who wants to make things different and having working class solutions. But the point is, I'm a Navy veteran. I work for UPS, and I've been working with the community for the past 10 years, even the West End. Bishop Lyons is a great friend of mine. But the point of the matter is that we need to start from the bottom up when it comes to leadership. Connecting with real people and having relationships that can build on that, because right now, even in the city of Louisville, everything is not just on the top. We need to go from the bottom up when it comes to leadership. Get people involved in the discussion and develop policies that will help them, going from the block to block, door to door, with DeVore. And the key point is this. This is where we need to focus on it, and I'm asking for your vote, www.more.com. So www.morewithdevore.com. Thank you.
Ms. Parrish-Wright.
Louisville, I have the honor of being your councilwoman for District 3. And I've decided to run for mayor again because I believe it's time for change. And change isn't scary. If we embrace it together, if we work on the things that matter to people, we can make Louisville even better. Term limits are there for a reason. Elections are so that we can choose the best candidate to give us the things that we need. I know you're tired. I know you're exhausted. I've heard your stories. You asked me to run. You asked me to give it another try because you want something different. I'm not here to take away from what you need. I'm here to add to that, and government should be working for you. I want a Louisville for everyone, and right now there's 2 Louisvilles. I need your help to help me build one Louisville together with you at the table by taking action and doing what matters most. Louisville, are you ready for change? I'm ready to lead. Thank you.
Ms. Burnell.
Good evening. My name is Tina Burnell, and I am running for mayor to take our city back from the powerful interests that have ignored the people for too long. Through the Louisville Metro Watchdog Alliance, I've exposed corruption, backroom deals, and the lack of transparency that is hurting our city. I've led the fight against inappropriate development and stood up for meaningful public input. I bring a unique combination of inside knowledge and outside courage. As a former city employee and a 7-year volunteer with LMPD, I know how the system is supposed to work, and I know how broken it is. I have faced malicious legal litigation for speaking the truth, but I have refused to be silenced. I am a lifelong resident of Louisville, and I have the hands-on experience and the backbone to ensure that our city government finally works for the citizens. If you're ready for change, I'm ready to lead and listen. I can't be bought, and I won't be intimidated. I'm Tina Burnell, and I'm asking for your vote.
Mr. DiTillo.
Howdy, and thanks for having me here tonight. Stephen the D. DiTillo. I'm a lifelong resident of the south end of Louisville. My goals have been basically to fix what's ever within my reach since as long as I've been old enough to hold a screwdriver. And I've worked on people, cars, houses, computers, and everywhere I've gone, things are better when I've left. I want to do the same thing for the city as a whole. I want to audit everything. I want to claw back the waste and stop flushing everything down to MSD. I want to put that money that we save to work with redeveloping our power infrastructure and most likely and potentially lowering our power prices by 2/3. I want to bring the hemp industry to Louisville in force and use it to rebuild our crumbling infrastructure and make it stronger than it's ever been. I want to give the police department 72 hours to release the body cams in any, shootings that may take place. And if the police officer was the victim, then we'll wait longer for the investigation to be concluded. Thank you very much.
Mr. Hurt.
Thank you. Good evening, friends. I am Jody Hurt. I'm a musician, a strategist, and an entrepreneur. I'm a coal miner's kid from Prestonsburg, where I grew up watching all of Appalachia get managed by folks in Pittsburgh and Chicago. When I moved here to Louisville, I recognized the same pattern. The 2003 merger didn't unify our community. It absorbed it. 50-plus cities handed their voices to a metro government that is managed from a distance. Louisville, Valley Station, Fern Creek, we all deserve to be governed, not managed. This means public transit, public city-owned affordable housing on downtown parking lots, and a serious process to reverse the merger that we were sold as progress and delivered as control. Tonight, you're going to hear a lot of really interesting ideas, a lot of new ideas for how to move Louisville forward. You can find them all at jody26.com.
Mr. Bailey.
Good evening, Louisvillians. My name is Matthew Bailey. I am a 21-year-old museum volunteer who's very passionate about politics and problems that affect my hometown. This election is critical in the safety and sustainability of Louisville and its people. It doesn't matter if you're a new voter, an old voter, or somebody who stays out of politics. Your vote matters. It doesn't matter if you align with me either, align with my policies or not. Please spread the word to make voter turnout the most impactful it can be in 2026. I want to give the rest of my time to bring up Adam Troutman, a 27-year-old Louisville resident who died in a hit and run in my neighborhood on April 16th around 11 p.m. LMPD believes that the driver was operating a 2016 or 2017 Chevy Equinox. If you have any information, please contact LMPD. Love Louisville.
And we will begin with our first question. We'll start with Mr. DeVore. That question is, if elected mayor, what would be your top priorities to achieve in the first 6 to 12 months?
First off, safety. People don't want to just feel safe. They want to know that they're safe and make sure that when they walk the streets, they know exactly what's happening. I want to go ahead and take care of our police force, make sure they got well versed when it comes to their equipment, their man hours. I want to hire another 500 police officers so they go in the neighborhoods and they could talk to their folks there. Now, the key point is this. If you really want to understand what's going on, then get involved with the group that can help them. So when we have police officers on the corner saying, hey, Joe, I'm here, and they focus on that, now we're talking about going from block to block, door to door, and taking care of crime because they're getting other people involved in it, which means citizens getting involved and making sure that everything is going correct.
Ms. Parrish-Wright.
Thank you. The first 6 months to 12 months of my time in office would, one, we need a forensic audit of many of the departments. Louisville Metro employs more than 5,000 people. I would spend a great deal of time meeting with them. Some positions will be eliminated. Some people will be able to share about ways to make Louisville Metro government better. We can't fix what's outside until we fix the internal issues with Louisville Metro. I will also meet with the unions to make sure that everyone is getting their just due on what needs to happen and pay. And we have a lot of discrepancies. People in Louisville Metro government they qualify for social services. I want to know how they're able to do their jobs, how we can make it better. And I will spend the first 6 months cleaning house.
If elected mayor, what would be your top priorities to achieve in the first 6 to 12 months? Ms. Burnell.
My 2 top priorities would be public safety and doing audits of our spending that has gone on for the last few years. I think people in Louisville are struggling with the mayor standing before them and telling them that crime and public safety have improved when everything that you see around you tells you differently. So I think I think safety, people feeling safe in their community, is the number one priority. And I think we have to work to get LMPD up to full strength. It has been below that for a very long time, and we have to do something to fix it. And the other thing is, I think it's very important for everyone to know where your tax money is being spent. And to that end, I would conduct audits to see where it's been spent, where it's been misused, and how we can clean that up.
Mr. DiTillo.
I can't help but agree with the others. We need massive audits. We need to know every dime that's been spent, and we need to focus on safety as well. There's been drive-bys on my street in the last year. There's been multiple shootings in my neighborhood. I live in the Beachmont community, and anybody who has paid attention can tell you that what they see on the streets versus what they hear in the news and how much better crime has gotten just don't match up. It's as plain as this giant nose on my face. I will also start making the deals that's going to bring the business to Louisville, make this place habitable and an environment of growth for everybody on every level, even the entrepreneurs, the people like you and me.
Repeating the question, if elected mayor, what would be your top priorities to achieve in the first 6 to 12 months? Mr. Hurt.
Thank you. My top priority, of course, is reversing the merger. Currently, our values within Jefferson County are misaligned. The East End has a veto over the decisions that people downtown want to do. And Metro takes money from Valley Station, Fern Creek, and spends almost nothing of consequence there. Lastly, Louisville is a target of Frankfurt by virtue of its being a category of 1. We are the only first-class city in the state of Kentucky, so that Frankfurt is able to pass laws that hurt Louisville or that affect us with never mentioning the word Louisville. Reverse the merger.
Mr. Bailey.
The 2 top priorities of mine are accountability and affordability. Now, gas prices and housing costs are driving hardworking Louisvillians into debt, let alone the price of groceries at the store. Our housing shortage should be remedied by the city partnering with local nonprofit housing organizations, changing local regulations, government-funded housing programs, and overall making it easier for Americans to afford the ability to live their lives without being on the brink of survival. Now, for accountability, we've seen time after time LMPD officers get cases dismissed against them, horrific ones, like the Breonna Taylor stuff.
Mr. Greenberg.
The number one responsibility of being mayor of Louisville is to make sure that everyone feels safe and is safe. We've reduced violent crime by over 40%. I want to thank Chief Paul Humphrey and all of the hardworking men of LMPD who engage in public service to keep us safe every day. We'll continue to give them the resources that they need and working to prevent crime from happening in the first place by strengthening partnerships with organizations that support our youth and young adults who are far too often the victims and perpetrators of violent crime. Also, at the beginning of the next term will be a new session of the General Assembly in Frankfurt. We've made great strides working with the state to invest in our city, and there'll be another opportunity to build more housing, to improve public safety, expand early childhood education. That's what I'll be focused on first.
For our second question, we will begin with Ms. Parrish Wright. What is your approach to improving public safety across the metro while also strengthening trust between residents and LMPD?
That's a great question, and I believe leadership means showing up. We have a lot of studies and plans that just sit on the shelf, We say that we're listening to community. We make things look good on paper, but that's not what we practice. And so whether people agree with me or not, I know that they deserve to access me, to access their elected official, to access the people who are supposed to be bringing us the safety that we should feel. The trusted, trained police force we've been promised has not been guaranteed for all Louisvillians. And my approach is making sure that we're making things accessible, not just having short-term surveys that many people can't access because we have a digital divide, and making sure our forms are real with action steps, departments, people assigned to take those action steps.
Ms. Burnell.
Can you repeat the question?
Yes. What is your approach to improving public safety across the metro while also strengthening trust between residents and LMPD?
Okay. I think that goes back to what I said, that, we've been operating below full strength for a very long time, and I think it's important that we need to take measures to fix that. Just recently, there was an article that came out that was, kind of lambasting our officers for all the overtime that they're working. But when we're short officers, that's really something we should be grateful for, that we have officers willing to show up. I have in my hand a memo from April 2nd where they're talking about more overtime this summer and targeting known areas of disorder and crime. So we'll see even more overtime. So I really think that the key is getting us up to full strength and getting more officers on the street, which frees up some of them to do more community policing and having conversations and getting to know people.
Mr. DiTillo.
As she mentioned, we are horribly short on officers. I would say over 200 in my last conversation with some of the members of LMPD. I would like to try and add some incentives to the bucket, maybe 0% home loans for officers that want to buy a home in the district they police, to get them more invested in the community. I would also like to see them training the community with repurposed, confiscated firearms that we've gotten from crimes that would otherwise be legal, and be able to be put in the hands of people that need them, the lower income coming first, of course. Other than that, I've got a whole platitude of ideas. You want to go to my website at datillo2026.com to check it out. I think you'll like what you see there.
Mr. Hurt.
Thank you. Our approach to public safety needs to be two-pronged. First, we need to combine fire, LMPD, and health into one unified public safety organization. But second, we need to expand the concept of what public safety is. Louisville has the verb magbarred, and that is insane. The fact that 4 restaurants were hit in less than 2 months this year and went by without a buzz is a problem. We need to be designing spaces that are safe to create public safety.
Mr. Bailey.
LMPD needs change, and I'm not referring to defunding them. That's not my plan. I want to improve the trust in our city's first responders by changing the internal regulations and culture of responsibility or accountability. We've seen time after time LMPD officers getting slaps on the wrist for their actions. And I'm done sitting down waiting for others to stand up. Miles Cosgrove, the officer who shot the fatal shot at Breonna Taylor in 2020, was fired, but never criminally charged, and now works as a deputy in Carroll County. That to me is not accountability. That's acceptance. Joshua Janes, the officer who falsified the no-knock search warrant and later tried covering it up, got all the charges dropped against him without prejudice.
Mr. Bailey, your time is up. Mr. Greenberg.
Ensuring that everyone is safe and feels safe is why we came out with our comprehensive strategy, Safe Louisville, that focuses on 3 things: prevention, intervention, and enforcement. We're working to prevent crime from happening in the first place, working with, in my proposed budget, organizations like Boys and Girls Club and Community Connections and others. We also need to stop the amount of illegal guns on the street. It's one of the reasons why I've been endorsed by a national organization, Every Town for Gun Safety, and we're working to get local autonomy to our city so that we can do more to crack down on illegal gun use. We also need to strengthen our collaboration with prosecutors and judges who play a very important role in the entire criminal justice system as well. all of this is working together, which is why we're making progress, but there is still so much more to do.
Mr. DeVore.
Yes, ma'am. This is where Greenberg and I disagree when it comes to the safety and welfare of our folks. We need to have police officers on the beat. Get them paid well. Right now, they're lucky to be in there in 5 years, and they're going somewhere else. We need to make sure they got a retirement they can be proud of, and we need to have that for them. EMS and same as the fire department need to be paid well. Give them benefits, because if we're going to really focus on the foundation of safety, we need to have our folks paid well and done correctly. Now, the point of the matter is this. I disagree with him. I think our crime is still high, and the numbers are being skewed when it comes to violations and misdemeanors. So, to me, that's where we have a disagreement. But the point of the matter is that it's time to do what's best for Louisville.
And for the next question, we will begin with Ms. Burnell. What is it going to take to enhance downtown Louisville and make it a destination part of our city?
Again, I think that comes back to public safety, but I think that our city has been so hyper-focused on tourism and making it an attraction for visitors that we're not focused enough on making it a safe and welcoming place for the people that live here. So I think we need to start there, and that, again, comes back to public safety. If we want people to get downtown, it has to be a clean, inviting, safe place to go.
Mr. DiTillo.
Well, first thing we're going to have to do is find a way to, house the immense amount of homeless and hopelessly addicted people that I see as I'm driving through downtown and my own neighborhood as well, and many throughout the city. I have a strong plan for long-term rehabilitation that will end them with a completely rebuilt psyche, bodies that are healthy, and trade skills that will make them valuable in the marketplace and to the city as well if they decide to pick up a civil position. Downtown does need a lot of revitalization. We've seen a lot of the windows getting boarded up and not coming down since the lockdowns, and now people are starting to whisper and worry about more lockdowns that may be around the corner. I wouldn't let the city fall into that trap.
Mr. Hurt. I'll repeat the question. What is it going to take to enhance downtown Louisville and make it a destination part of our city?
Thank you. I believe that our city has been managed as a destination rather than a place that people live. And the outgrowth of that is that there's no grocery stores downtown, right? There's a lot of things that we're missing. So once we begin to focus on the livable aspect of Louisville, of governing for the people who live here, we might think, well, let's make downtown a neighborhood where people actually live. My plan for that is called Lots to Lots. I want to purchase street parking lots and build four-story apartment buildings that are rented at 80% of the market rate, owned by the city.
Mr. Bailey.
To help our city become more of a destination on the map in the United States, we need to improve our public transit and our infrastructure. Specifically, the work that's happening on the highway downtown. I'm not sure exactly if they're doing anything about the on and off exits, but a lot of those are really, really short and they cause a lot of wrecks. But we also need to focus on making it easier for people to get around the city with TARC and other options.
Mr. Greenberg.
I'd first like to fact check from the last question. I'm proud that since I've been mayor, we've given record raises to our LMPD police officers, fires, and EMS. I encourage you to look at that. We'll continue to do that in the coming years as well. In terms of downtown Louisville, downtown should be the safest, cleanest, greenest, most authentic, energetic neighborhood in our entire city. We've been making progress. And I'm proud of the results that the General Assembly has given us funding to invest more in things like the Community Care Campus, which provides shelter and services to individuals who are in need, to help them get on a positive path in life, to give us funding to create a new downtown fund where we can provide investments in local businesses that are looking to start and create in downtown. Downtown is coming back, and you're going to see a lot more progress over the coming years to come.
Mr. DeVore.
Yes, Greenberg made a lot of promises that he broke. We're talking about safety. We're talking about trash in the streets. He said he wants the cleanest city in the world, but it ain't happening. We have 7,000 abandoned homes. None of it's really worked out for them. Why not go ahead and turn that into an investment, keep that money going into the West End, focus on what is best for you. This is what we need to do. Focus on what's best for you when it comes to building and revamping homes, giving people a chance to own their own home, not just be in apartments being swirled around year after year, paying the same thing. Next thing you know, is up $1,200. There's no balance in that point. So what we want to focus on what's best for you and making sure that you have a quality of life and making sure that everything is done correctly.
Ms. Pierce-Wright.
I'll take a different approach. Downtown will be fine. I hear all the investment about downtown and it feels like a shell game, but I see empty buildings and it is coming back because life thrives around water. There will always be investment in downtown, but what about the other neighborhoods and the communities across our county? What city merger promised was that all of those communities would benefit from the tourism. I see small businesses, a 62-year-old business on Preston and Market Street who says he just wants the bike lane fixed. And so if we're not taking care of the small business that are here, we won't have a downtown. It will be an empty city with no people in it. No tourist wants to come to a place that's empty without people that can access it, and they can't use the restroom. And so downtown will be fine if we spread out the investment throughout the county.
Question number 4, we'll start with Mr. DiTillo. Louisville faces an affordable housing shortage with an estimated deficit of about 36,000 units. What role should Metro government play in making housing more affordable for renters, homeowners, and people experiencing homelessness?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I'm a huge fan of industrializing hemp for cheaper building materials. It would go across saving the city with the road work, and we'd be able to invest more into helping out and building these homes, and we'd be able to use the hemp products, the hempcrete, the hemp polymers, the hemp wood, getting planks of the stuff made easily. And we could all do it here in town, creating more jobs, more people to be able to buy houses and pay taxes. We got so many opportunities open to us that we just have to take the initiative to step forward and do.
Mr. Hurt.
Thank you. Our housing crisis is part of a global crisis. It's a global asset crisis. We can't just build our way out of this problem. We have to build and not add to the asset bubble. My proposal is called Lots to Lofts. I want to build 2,000 apartments in 1 year, 10,000 in 4 years. Apartments rented at 80% of market rate, owned by the city, so that it does not contribute to our market bubble.
Mr. Bailey.
Like I said earlier in a previous question, the economic outlook in the U.S. is dire. And that's not only for Louisville, but I live in Louisville, so it affects me. Gas prices and housing costs are driving the hardworking people in Louisville into debt. And our housing shortage needs to be remedied. I have ideas like partnering with local nonprofits to help create housing opportunities for people, changing local regulations to make it easier, government-funded housing programs, and that's it.
Repeating the question, Louisville faces an affordable housing shortage with an estimated deficit of 36,000 units. What role should Metro government play in making housing more affordable for renters, homeowners, and people experiencing homelessness? Mr. Greenberg.
Thanks, Carrie. Everyone in Louisville deserves a safe, quality, and affordable place to call home. It's the foundation for everything else we want to achieve in our life. We've built over 7,000 new units of affordable housing in the past 3 years, but we all know that's not nearly enough. We must do more, and that's what we're doing. We're working on building the Community Care Campus, which will open this spring to provide more services and shelter to those most in need. more permanent supportive housing also to help those most in need. We're working to transform our vacant and abandoned properties through innovative models like the lien forgiveness program that we launched, and providing incentives to families so that they can buy their very first home to start create generational wealth for their families and improve neighborhoods at the same time.
Mr. DeVore.
Yes. So when it comes to the abandoned homes, and there are a lot of them, and it's so disgusting because you have rats running through there, you have drug use going through there, and the point of the matter is that we need to go ahead and clean that out there so our citizens can take over and focus on building one house at a time, flip it, build another house at a time, flip that over, and keep that economic growth down there and keep wealth down there, generational wealth. We had not heard that word in a long time. So you have an opportunity to build your own wealth, but you have to do it together. And that's the key point. So when we do that together, then we're focused on what is best for our children and best for the whole city of Louisville, not just downtown, but the whole Jefferson County. And that's what we need to do. And I'm hoping to bring that in there for you.
Ms. Pierce-Wright.
Thank you. I wouldn't be here without housing stability. I wouldn't be here without transitional housing. And I know how important it is, and it was for me and my family. I want every family to have it. The truth is we don't have enough housing stock for everyone to own a home. We have a great deal of renters that need and deserve our support. We have to make sure that I was in this place 2022, and it was promised that we would have 15,000 new units. And then those numbers grew by grabbing all the other housing development that was coming and putting it together and putting a stamp on it. We need real numbers that really mean that we're going to meet those needs. We were 30,000 in, we're over 36,000 now. That's going to take mixed-use development. It's going to take housing and affordable housing in every zip code, and I'm willing to fight for that without building a new hotel.
Ms. Burnell.
I want to point out that Mayor Greenberg started with the slogan of his favored developer in our city, the one that our city just gave $6 million plus legislative changes to, and I think that's very telling. So this is a problem we throw a lot of taxpayer money at, and I think that there needs to be much more accountability when we are giving away taxpayer money to a for-profit developer. This is a very profitable industry. That does not get talked about enough. And I think we also need to expand the conversation when we're talking about affordability to what are we going to do for the people that already have homes. We have seniors who are afraid of losing their homes because of rising property taxes. We have people who cannot pay their utility bills and cannot afford groceries. So we need to look at making it affordable for all citizens.
For our next question, we will start with Mr. Hurt. What does inclusive economic growth look like for Louisville?
Inclusive economic growth requires us to recognize where the growth that we currently have and the status that we currently have came from. Louisville and many other cities in the United States were a product of something called redlining, where the federal government refused to back loans to places that would have anything other than white Anglo-Saxon Protestant individuals. So people who were immigrants and black communities were denied generational wealth. So a fair development of this would be a green line benefit where we pay people who live in redlined districts a monthly fee straight up.
Mr. Bailey.
Can you repeat the question?
Yes. What does inclusive economic growth look like for Louisville?
Well, for Louisville to grow, we first need to recognize that not every part of Louisville gets the attention that it needs. There are parts of Louisville, like parts down south, the West End, that don't get the funding they need for basic things. And that affects everything. That affects economy, prices of houses, all sorts of things. And we need to first go in and try to spread our coverage of how we're going to help Louisville instead of focusing on one key area of the city. We're a city, not a neighborhood.
Mr. Greenberg.
Inclusive opportunity means that everyone, regardless of where you live, should have the opportunity to succeed whatever your dreams may be. It's one of the reasons why we created the South End Development Fund, to provide opportunities for local businesses in South Louisville, an area that's been overlooked for far too long, with opportunities to grow. It's why we invest in organizations like AMPed that provide resources to entrepreneurs in West Louisville to give them the tools that they need to create new businesses. It's why we invest in workforce development organizations like Kentuckiana Works and Summer Works and the academies of Louisville, so that when folks graduate from high school and young adults, they have the tools that they need to pursue their hopes and dreams, whatever they may be.
Repeating the question, Mr. DeVore, what does inclusive economic growth look like for Louisville?
Well, first off, West End had been promised $86 million for development down there, and it had not happened. We have the Neal Center, which is a fantastic idea, and getting them the opportunity to be self-efficient, and they can show and give education to the kids and bring in opportunity for the senior citizens to come in and do their taxes. So we have a lot of growth there, but we have the red line we need to break down. We need to have grocery stores in the West End where they can be proud of, have healthy vegetables, meats, things like that, instead of the saturated potato chips they get off of the corner drugstore. But the point of the matter is that they have to get involved in it so we can come together and do what's right for Louisville.
Ms. Pierce, right?
The budget is a moral document, and if our budget continues to gut social services, nobody will have the growth that we deserve. But I do, shameless plug, if you go to shamikaforlouisville.com, I have a 12-point inclusive economic development plan. When we knock on the doors, people tell us this administration only cares about tourism and big business. We know that tourism matters, but small businesses matter too. And it will be my duty to make sure that all the neighborhoods, and especially those who are the backbone to development, getting the support that they need. Violence, food deserts, underfunded services, and economy is not working for everyone. Economic development does not touch every zip code. It will be my priority to make sure that it does, because we got to make this city run every day together. My administration will focus on balanced growth, and as I said, you can find that information on my website.
Ms. Burnell.
I agree with a lot of what Shamika just said there, and I think overall, inclusive means that we include the people. We include all businesses. We bring everybody to the table. And right now, we're not seeing a lot of that. We're seeing a lot of exclusive development, exclusive investment going on that isn't reaching all the people. And I find it interesting that Mayor Greenberg starts showing up and talking about investing in parts of town that he's neglected for the last 3 years. I live in Southwest Louisville. I hope that people can see through the charade.
Mr. DiTillo.
Yes. As far as economic growth goes, just beyond the hemp factories and the proposed power systems rebuild that I'm wanting to lower the city's entire electrical budget by 2/3 with, I want to repurpose the terminally unleasable properties like the Rite Aids and the CVSs that we can't get anybody to invest into, and give them on a grant by system to people who have the small business startup needs. Give them 2-3 years, maybe even include utilities and cable if that helps them to get their business off the ground. I also want to give teachers the opportunity to, with my JCPS reform plan, to start their own micro schools funded with JCPS and under their control, with the ability to choose the children and work with the parents on how to train them.
For our next question, we will begin with Mr. Bailey. How should Louisville engage the AI industry while also creating space for public input on the locations of data centers?
Well, there's already been a data center that has come into Louisville. It's been near a neighborhood, and the people are not happy with it because they didn't have any time to protest it or even have a voice out there and say their thoughts. Now, I am against AI data centers. They consume a ton of water, put strain on the power grid, and overall, they do not add enough to the city to to have them,
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Mr. Greenberg.
This is one of the areas that's a problem across our entire country, where technology is moving faster than government has so far. And I share the concerns of Louisville residents about this growth in this area. And that's why right now we're working with Metro Council and other members of the community to ensure that any company that's thinking about building a data center in Louisville in the future can answer questions. Can answer questions like, how are you going to protect ratepayers so that only the company pays for the electricity and that ratepayers don't go up? How are you going to protect our water and our environment? Is your project going to be built with union labor? These questions must be answered satisfactorily before any new data centers are built in Jefferson County.
Mr. DeVore.
Yeah, so data centers and AI. So I'm getting these phone calls on there asking them, do I want a burial or do I need to work on my A, B, Social Security? All this stuff is going on day in, day out. I'm getting all these phone calls and everybody else across Louisville is doing the same thing. So there's got to be some control here when it comes to AI. I don't trust it. They got a lot of information, sensitive information that's yours. And you're wondering what they're doing with it. They're selling it off to the highest bid? We don't know. But the point of the matter is there's got to be some control here and focusing on what's best for Louisville, and especially when it comes to your own Social Security systems. Now, you're the one that has to worry about that, but why do AI have to be involved in the process? That's my question.
Ms. Parrish-Wright.
Thank you. I almost asked you to repeat the question. I just heard a lot of contradiction from Mayor Greenberg. How does someone he's in partnership with the Humana Hotel, who is a part of the new data telecommunications hotel, not know what's happening? I'm tired of the backroom deals that bring these things about, and because he is exactly right, this stuff is ahead of the laws. By the time even on council we catch on, it's too late because something has already been zoned. So as mayor, I want to protect Louisville. I told Louisville in 2022 that we need a protector that wouldn't sell us down the river. If we don't get somebody in there willing to say no to the money, who isn't beholden to their highest donors, we're going to see more of these data centers pop up, because obviously the dollar matters more than the people's needs, and we've had too much of that.
Repeating the question, how should Louisville engage the AI industry while also creating space for public input on the locations of data centers? Ms. Burnell.
Well, I want to echo some of, again, what Shamika said. I do think that we need a protector, and I think we need somebody who's going to fight for the people. I have a hard time comprehending Mayor Greenberg sitting down there and waiting until after his associate's massive hyperscale data center was approved, but now he shares our concern. It's another backroom deal where the people don't matter. In fact, what he said was, this data center will create thousands of good-paying jobs here in Louisville. As the need for data centers grow, Louisville is perfectly positioned to meet the demands of the tech sector. He didn't ask us about our opinion. He hasn't shown any concern for the environment or the damage that this development is going to cause. So while I personally understand the importance of AI, we have to protect our community.
Mr. Datillo.
Well, as far as the AI data centers are concerned, I'm working in technology for a large part of my career. I understand that there are things that we can do. We can demand that the centers are responsible for providing their own power systems. If it's a smaller power plant on the plant's vicinity or close to it, it still has to be theirs, and they're responsible for it. And as far as coolant goes, do they have to order some water towers to put in? If they do, they better start thinking about it. Or they can do submerged systems, which can save a lot of energy for them as well, and without as much of the sound.
Mr. Hurt?
Thank you.
I would repeat the question.
Thank you.
How should Louisville engage the AI industry while also creating space for public input on the locations of data centers?
Thank you. Well, we shouldn't have a chief of AI. Like, that's a sort of a non-starter. When it comes to the data centers, which is sort of the bigger issue, I'm not a Luddite. I'm not opposed to progress, but the pressure for these things is so immense. We had been asked to make a generational decision, a generational commitment to these buildings, without having any tools to properly evaluate the impact that they would have on us. And if a developer is pushing this hard for these things to get built before there's any testing, we know all we need to know about those data centers.
For our next question, we will begin with Mr. Greenberg. What investments in parks, libraries, arts, culture, and recreation would most improve quality of life in Louisville?
This is an area where we need to continue our investing. Parks and libraries are some of the gems of our community, places where families can go to learn, to be safe, to expand their horizons, to get healthy outdoor activity. We've invested significantly in our libraries, reopened and expanded the Parkland and Portland Library, the Parkland Library being closed for 46 years. A new library is under construction in Fern Creek. By the end of my first term as mayor, we'll have invested over $100 million improving parks all across the community. From the South End Jefferson Memorial Forest, the new Nick Rodman Legacy Park. In the West End, we have the best water park in the entire region, Algonquin Park. In the East End, Hounds Lane Park, and in every one of the 120 parks all across our community. These are the gems of our city that bring us together, and we'll keep investing.
Mr. DeVore?
Well, I have a problem with that. The fact that I even on a news article that said that the Memorial Gym, or the auditorium, which is over on 97 South 4th Street, is not going to be funded. Now, we have a lot of good things that happen in that auditorium where middle-class folks can enjoy life and see ballet and see different things when it comes to art, and kids are getting involved. So we need to fund that auditorium. This auditorium was in May of 2029, and the people use it to honor the World War II veterans. So I'm asking the mayor to fund that auditorium so we can have that back. That's history, real history we have for a long time. Just an example.
Ms. Pierce, right?
Thank you. The budget is a moral document. That's what you're hearing. A lot of decisions are made without the people's input. We need a participatory budget that really directs where our funding is going, because these are not the administration's dollars. These are your tax dollars. We have libraries are pillars. Parks are pillars, and we need investment in all of our parks, and we can find the money to do that. I always speak on Shively Library. It's one of the most used library, but small, the smallest library. And so those decisions made. Mr. DeVore is right. I used to go to concerts in that auditorium. And so we do good in making things look good on paper, but we do not follow through. I'm tired of pilot projects. I'm tired of the startup things that we don't invest in. I want to work for the people and invest in where they think the money should go.
Repeating the question, what investments in parks, libraries, arts, culture, and recreation would most improve quality of life in Louisville, Ms. Burnell?
Well, I'm going to agree with Mayor Greenberg on this. I think that we are making solid investments in these things, and I think they are crucial to our community, things that people can do, things that people can love and get out and enjoy. And so I think we need to continue the investment as it is going.
Mr. DiTillo.
As far the parks and the libraries, I can tell you that in the District 21 where I'm from and the surrounding areas, you cannot go to a park or library without seeing the orange caps from syringes, the abandoned clothing from the people that had just left a few hours before if they were pushed away, or maybe they're still sleeping in the bushes with a pile of their belongings. It's the homelessness and the addiction that's making the parks and libraries to be not as attractive as they should be, not as safe as they should be. We have to address the addiction crisis and the homelessness crisis that holds hands to be able to focus on other things that we need to take a look at.
Mr. Hurt.
Thank you. The things that the mayor mentioned are actually really great, but they're largely built for visitors, not for our locals. Our neighborhoods haven't been invested in. We know that one of the biggest challenges for young artists is housing, and I propose that we double down on an LO project, which is really amazing, where they invite four young composers to live in the city and provide housing for them. It's something Detroit did where they said, if you live here and work here, we'll give you a house for 10 years. I think that's a wonderful idea for building up a housing community. And lastly, parks are the gem of our community, and we need to remove through traffic from them.
Repeating the question, what investments in parks, libraries, arts, culture, and recreation would most improve quality of life in Louisville? Mr. Bailey.
Committed to funding parks and recreational activities in parts of Louisville that are often overlooked. It is great that Fern Creek is getting a library, but Fern Creek is not the only place in Louisville that needs help. There are other parts of Louisville, like the West End and places in the south of Louisville, that need more parks, more libraries, more things to keep young children's minds occupied. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Moving on to our next question, we will begin with Mr. DeVore. How would you make Metro government more transparent, responsive, and accountable to residents?
First off, I would do an independent audit, starting from the bottom up. We need to find out where every penny is being spent. This is your money, and focusing on every project, every program that Metro Council and the Metro government is responsible for, so that you'll know exactly what's going on. Because this is your money, and you want that money being spent wisely for the people in the West End, East End, South, and North. But the point of the matter is that we got to focus on what's going on with our money and where it's being spent. And if it's not worth the program, we need to get rid of it and focus on what is best in building a safety and a wellness society when it comes to people being that they know they're safe, but guaranteed a good quality of life.
Ms. Pierce-Wright.
Thank you. City Hall, Metro government has a lot of great people who help it run as an engine, but it also has a lot of nepotism, a lot of toxic things that are happening internally. And so the first thing we need to do, and I agree with Mr. DeVore, is making sure that there are audits for every department, that the equity line is really addressed. We say we had a racial equity plan. How is that applied to the different departments? I hear from police officers. I hear from all kinds of people who tell me they've been passed up for promotion. So we got a lot of internal work to do, and that's what I would spend most of my time on. But I do want to address with Mr. D that not enough spaces for people to go. People are being cleaned up because they're homeless, and not all homeless people are on substances. There is not enough places for people to go. I want 24-hour community centers and more 24-hour places for people to go. Thank you.
Ms. Burnell.
Repeat the question.
Yes. How would you make Metro government more transparent, responsive, and accountable to residents?
Okay. This question is right up my alley because I am currently involved in a lawsuit that Metro Council filed against me because I exposed some things that went on behind closed doors. So I think it's important to remember every public servant in this city works for the people. You were elected to represent the people. We deserve to know what's going on in our city and with our money. One of the biggest things that we can do is expand the open data portal that we already have. There is some good information on there. We can expand upon that. We can take any open records requests that are filed and go ahead and put that information out for anybody else who may be looking for it. So that is one way that we can help expand that because people deserve to know where their money's being spent.
Mr. Datillo.
Yes. First, I'd like to say thank you for pointing out. Myself, I spent a couple of years homeless after the discovery that my father with the same name had taken my Social Security number and done the whole travel around the country collecting felonies. And I became a member of those people who live on the streets and slept on the concrete. And I learned a lot of valuable life lessons from it. We really do need to perform the full audits, and I would be proud to hire Tina to teach the City Council how to behave as adults, as we've seen they have issues doing with at times, and to make sure that they're spending the money properly. Other than that, I think that would be a good start. Audit every dang thing.
Mr. Hurt, repeating the question, how would you make Metro government more transparent, responsive, and accountable to residents?
Thank you. I would make Metro government more accountable and responsive by reversing the merger. I do not believe that Metro government should exist at this point. We were sold a bill of goods, we were sold progress, and it has been delivered as distance, it has been delivered as hidden decisions, and private meetings. We should make it very simple that all public meetings are literally public, perhaps streamed, but we need to go back to, and this is not about nostalgia. This is not some things used to be better. We need to be closer to the people making decisions everywhere.
Mr. Bailey.
Louisville needs a more transparent government. Audits need to happen. We need a see-through LMPD, one that you can trust, with new leadership, regulations, and a culture of accountability. And people need to be held accountable all throughout the government. So we need to look into things. I would like to also point out that in a previous question, I was meaning to say that this is not only a problem with LMPD, but a problem with the judicial system in Kentucky as a whole regarding the Breonna Taylor case. When I ran out of time, I yield.
Mr. Greenberg.
We've taken significant steps forward to make Louisville Metro government more transparent. When I first became mayor, I started holding weekly press conferences so the members of the media can ask me questions every week on any topics of their choosing, in addition to many other interactions with them throughout the week. With respect to LMPD, we've also taken steps there. Now, anytime that there's an officer-involved shooting, the body camera footage is released within 10 business days, in addition to many other steps forward under the community commitment that the chief and I voluntarily signed to make sure we build and strengthen trust with the community. We've cleared up the open records backlog so that people can get their requests for information quicker. And you can go online to one of the many Louisville Metro government dashboards that provide real-time information and where every dollar of your taxpayer money is spent.
For a final question, we will start with Ms. Parrish-Wright. What is one thing you want Louisville residents to understand about how you would lead that may not come through in campaign ads or headlines?
Good, because I don't have $1 million war chest, so I don't have a lot of TV, but I do have a lot of community. I have a lot of working across lines of difference. I manage $1 million budgets with the nonprofits that I help run with no discrepancies. I know how to do the job, but being a candidate and doing a job are two different things. I'm running this as a candidate that is not lying to you, that will keep her word, that will make sure you're at the table, that will listen and take action steps, and I'm looking forward to hiring more Louisvillians into Metro government who are ready for the changes that we need. I won't undo big business. Nobody can do that. A mayor has to deal with big business. But what we've had is mayors who only focus on big business and not the everyday needs of people. I live in the Louisville that you live in, and I'm ready to lead with you.
Ms. Burnell.
Can you repeat that for me?
Yes. What is one thing you want Louisville residents to understand about how you would lead that may not come through in campaign ads or headlines?
Okay. I want people to know that I will bring integrity to my administration, that I truly understand what transparency and accountability mean, not just lip service to it. Our city has been co-opted by a developer supremacy mentality, which means unrestrained development at all costs, and we're not being given a voice in that. The people of this city deserve to have a voice in what their neighborhoods look like and what their communities look like in the future of our city. So I want to make sure people that understand that I'm ready to listen and I'm ready to serve, and I understand this is a public service position. I will lead with you. Thank you.
Mr. Datillo.
Well, I'm not afraid of a fight. Most people say that they don't want to get into politics because they're afraid of their name being ruined or how they may turn out. I'm not worried about it. I've already had my reputation ruined multiple times, and I've clawed my way back from every one of them. I've been at the very bottom, and I know what it looks like down there, and I know how to get the people that are still down there up to where they need to be. I have never shied away from talking about corruption or where waste is taking place. As a matter of fact, everywhere I go, it gets exposed.
Mr. Hurt.
Thank you. When I founded Orchestra Enigmatic in 2012 here in Louisville, I set my goal as being the chief collaborator. When I say that the city is being managed, not governed, this is what I mean. Decisions are made at a distance for us, and they're handed to us. My leadership style is by elevating voices. I bring whoever I can into the room, and I listen. And I listen for weighted words, like every artist does. Thank you.
Repeating the question, Mr. Bailey, what is one thing you want Louisville residents to understand about how you would lead that may not come through in campaign ads or headlines?
Well, I haven't had much publicity, so I'd say everyone is equal, and I will fight for you. I don't care what you look like. I don't care what religion you practice. I don't care what your sexuality is. I don't care about any aspects of you besides you being a Louisville citizen. If you are in Louisville, you are my people. I will fight for you. I'm not scared of what's to come. I expect lawsuits and stuff. If that happens, that means that's a good thing, because I'm fighting for what's right. I yield my time.
Mr. Greenberg.
Over the past 3 years, Louisville's been through a lot. The Old National Bank shooting on April 10th of 2023. Floods and tornadoes in spring of last year. The UPS plane crash last November. A federal government shutdown. Challenging times that have brought our community together. And through all of those, what I've realized most is it's about helping individual people. And while that might not always get the headline, it's about providing for the senior to make sure that they don't miss a meal when the federal government cuts their funding. Finding ways to provide more health care so that families in need can continue to be healthy. Helping people get back into their home after they've been flooded out. Supporting each one of the victims of the deadly UPS plane crash. That's what local government is about. It's about helping people and always doing the right thing for people all across our city. I ask for your vote and look forward to continue moving Louisville in a new direction.
Mr. DeVore.
By the grace of God, I am here. This is my third time. This is my time to serve. I have been working with West End folks for over 10 years. You know, the old saying is the journey that we take, relationships that we make, good and bad and ugly. And sometimes we got to get through the ugly to find out the real truth and find solutions. Cole Green is a prime example of that. Bishop Lyons and a couple of the guys down there created a document where that when they get pulled over, they know exactly what's going on when it comes to the procedures between a driver and the police officer. That came from the very basics of community work and effort. And the point of the matter is that I'm here to serve you, including the independent. We got 75,000 independents out there. Go vote.
And that concludes our time for questions. I want to thank all of our candidates for participating in tonight's forum. We also want to thank the League of Women Voters for partnering with us tonight. And we hope this forum has given you, the voter, more information about each candidate running for Louisville mayor. The Kentucky primary election, Tuesday, May 19th. Polls are open from 6 in the morning until 6 in the evening. For WLKY, I'm Carrie Grace. Thank you for watching. We'll return to programming.